Your 40-year crime spree is over, Ms. Pelosi. Senator John Kennedy just dropped a nuclear bomb on live television. In the next 90 minutes, he would expose a corrupt empire that reaches every corner of government. Nancy Pelosi thought she was untouchable. She'd controlled Washington for 4 decades. She destroyed anyone who challenged her. But she made one fatal mistake. She called a Southern gentleman with an Oxford education a hillbilly philosopher. Big mistake. What you're about to witness is the most devastating political takedown in American history. Every word is documented. Every crime has receipts. Every lie gets exposed. Smash that like button right now because this story will blow your mind. The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room fell silent as Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana adjusted his reading glasses with the deliberate precision of a man who knew exactly what kind of theatrical destruction he was about to unleash. Across from him sat Nancy Pelosi, former Speaker of the House, radiating the confidence of someone who'd survived 4 decades of Washington warfare without a scratch. She had no idea she was about to be filleted like a Louisiana catfish by a man she dismissed as a hillbilly philosopher. "Well, Ms. Pelosi," Kennedy began, his thick Louisiana drawl coating each word like molasses on a hot summer day. "Down in Louisiana, we have a saying, when the gumbo starts smelling funny, it's time to check what's in the pot. And ma'am, your pot's been smelling mighty peculiar for about 40 years now." The C-SPAN cameras captured Pelosi's slight eye roll. She'd dealt with Southern politicians before. Their folksy charm was usually a cover for intellectual inadequacy. She'd been briefed that Kennedy liked to play the country lawyer routine, but she knew she could handle him. After all, she'd been Speaker of the House. Twice. She'd impeached presidents. She'd controlled trillion-dollar budgets. What she didn't know was that John Neely Kennedy held a degree from Oxford University, had been a Rhodes Scholar, and had spent the last 6 months preparing for this exact moment with the precision of a prosecutor preparing for the trial of the century. "Senator Kennedy," Pelosi responded with practiced condescension, "I'm happy to discuss my 4 decades of public service, though I'm not sure what Louisiana folklore has to do with congressional oversight." Kennedy smiled. It was the kind of smile a gator might give right before it snaps its jaws shut. "Oh, I think you'll find Louisiana wisdom has quite a bit to teach Washington, ma'am. For instance, my meemaw always told me that when someone's been cooking the books for 40 years, eventually someone's going to check the recipes." He pulled out a thick folder marked Pelosi Family Finances, Investigative Report, and placed it on the desk with the theatrical flair of a magician revealing his first trick. "Now, I know you're busy, so let's skip the appetizers and go straight to the main course, shall we? Smash that like button because you're about to witness the most devastating political takedown in Senate history. A Southern gentleman is about to teach the Washington elite what real accountability looks like." Senator Kennedy leaned back in his chair with the casual air of a man sitting on his front porch in Zachary, Louisiana, about to tell a story that would leave his listeners slack-jawed. The other senators on the committee leaned forward, sensing something extraordinary was about to happen. Pelosi." Kennedy began, his voice warm as sweet tea. "I want to start by congratulating you on your remarkable success. 40 years in Congress, that's quite an achievement. Your family's done mighty well, too. Your husband, Paul, he's quite the investor, isn't he?" Pelosi straightened slightly, sensing a trap, but not sure where it was coming from. "My husband's investments are all properly disclosed and completely legal, Senator." "Oh, I'm sure they are, ma'am. Legal as a duck hunting license in November." Kennedy opened his folder and pulled out a chart that looked like a statistician's fever dream. "But you know what's interesting, and I mean more interesting than watching paint dry on a humid day?" He held up the chart for the cameras to see clearly. "Your husband has made 147 major stock trades over the past 5 years. And here's where it gets curious as a cat in a fish market. He's had a 96% success rate. 96%. Kennedy let out a low whistle that somehow managed to sound both impressed and accusatory. "Now, I'm just a country lawyer from Zachary, but those odds are better than a rigged casino in Vegas. Better than knowing the lottery numbers before they're drawn. Better than knowing whether it's going to rain when you've got the weather report in your back pocket." He pulled out another document, this one showing a timeline. "Let's look at some of these remarkable coincidences. July 2019, your husband buys $5 million in Microsoft stock. 3 days later, Microsoft gets a $10 billion Pentagon contract that was discussed in your classified briefing. March 2021, Paul purchases $6 million in Tesla calls. 4 days later, the Biden administration announces massive electric vehicle subsidies that you helped negotiate in private sessions. September 22. He loads up on semiconductor stocks. 1 week later, the CHIPS Act passes away with billions in subsidies you championed. Kennedy looked up from his papers, his eyes twinkling with the satisfaction of a fisherman who just felt a big one take the bait. Now down in Louisiana, we've got folks who can predict the weather by watching which way the cows are standing. But predicting the stock market with 96% accuracy, that's not wisdom, ma'am. That's what we call insider trading in English, or cheating in plain speak. Pelosi's face had started to flush. Senator, you're insinuating something without any proof. Oh, I'm not insinuating anything, Kennedy interrupted gently. I'm just reading numbers. Numbers don't lie, unlike some folks in this town. They're like grits, plain simple and hard to dress up as something they're not. He pulled out another sheet, this one from the SEC. The Securities and Exchange Commission did a statistical analysis. The probability of achieving your husband's success rate through legitimate market analysis is approximately 1 in 7.4 billion. Those are worse odds than getting struck by lightning while winning the Powerball during a solar eclipse. Kennedy leaned forward, his folksy demeanor suddenly sharpening like a knife being drawn from its sheath. But here's what really gets my goat, ma'am. While your family was making millions from these conveniently timed trades, regular Americans were losing their retirement savings. Teachers in Louisiana, firefighters in California, nurses in Iowa. They didn't have access to those classified briefings you attended. Did they? He pulled out letters, actual letters from constituents. This here's from Mary Beth Johnson in Lake Charles. Lost $200,000 from her 401k during the pandemic while your husband made $5 million betting on Zoom and Amazon. She wrote to your office asking for help. You sent her a form letter. This one's from Roberto Martinez in Baton Rouge. His small business went under while you were negotiating which big corporations would get bailouts. Funny how your husband bought stock in every company that got saved, isn't it? The hearing room was dead silent except for the sound of cameras clicking and keyboards clacking as reporters frantically typed up their stories. You know what we call it in Louisiana when someone uses their position to make money while regular folks suffer? Kennedy asked, his voice now carrying an edge sharp enough to cut steel. We call it stealing, but I suppose in Washington you call it constituent services? Think that's corrupt. You haven't seen anything yet. Like this video, if you want to see how deep this rabbit hole goes, comment below. Should congressional insider trading be investigated by the FBI? Kennedy turned to a new section in his folder marked with tabs labeled Water Rights, California Drought, Pelosi Vineyards. The seasoned politicians in the room recognized the methodical preparation of someone who'd been building this case for months. Now, Mrs. Pelosi, Kennedy continued, his Louisiana drawl thickening like roux in a hot pot. Let's talk about your vineyard in Napa Valley. Beautiful property. I'm sure the wine is delicious. I prefer bourbon myself, but to each their own. He pulled out satellite images and water usage records that looked like they'd been obtained through considerable investigative effort. During the California drought of 2021-2023, when regular Californians were being fined for watering their lawns, when farmers were watching their crops die, when families were limited to 50 gallons of water per day, your vineyard somehow used 15 million gallons of water. 15 million. Kennedy held up the documentation for everyone to see. That's enough water for 500 California families for a year. But somehow, while children in Fresno were taking bucket baths to save water, your grapes were getting more hydration than a marathon runner in August. Pelosi shifted uncomfortably. Water rights are complex legal matters. Oh, they sure are, Kennedy agreed cheerfully. Complex as a plate of crawfish étouffée. But you know what's not complex? This here document showing that you received a special exemption from water restrictions, signed by the California Water Resources Board, 3 of whose members received campaign contributions from your PAC totaling $75,000. He pulled out bank records and campaign finance reports. Isn't it remarkable how generous you become right before you need favors like clockwork? More regular than a rooster crowing at dawn. Kennedy's voice took on a storytelling quality, as if he were sitting on a porch in the bayou, regaling friends with tales of government corruption. But here's where it gets more twisted than a tornado in a trailer park. While your vineyard was swimming in water, the Lopez family farm, been in their family for 4 generations, had to shut down. No water allocation. They applied for the same exemption you got. Denied. He held up a photograph of a dried, dead orchard. The Nguyen family vegetable farm provided fresh produce to food banks throughout the Central Valley. Had to close. No water. But your wine grapes, they were doing just fine. Kennedy pulled out financial documents. Your vineyard produced 100,000 bottles of wine during the worst drought in California history. At $95 a bottle retail, that's $9.5 million in revenue. While farms that fed people were dying, your luxury wine business was thriving. He looked directly at Pelosi, his expression now serious as a heart attack. You know what really chaps my hide about this? My grandfather was a rice farmer in Louisiana. Lived through the Depression. He used to say, in hard times you share your water with your neighbor, even if it means your crops suffer. But I guess in California, you just buy your way to the front of the line and let everyone else go thirsty. Kennedy pulled out one more document, a legal complaint filed by California farmers. 17 farming families have filed complaints about your special treatment. They're calling it water apartheid. Their words, not mine. Though I think Pelosi privilege has a nice ring to it. He leaned back, letting the weight of the evidence settle over the room like fog over the bayou. While California families couldn't water their lawns, your vineyard somehow had enough water for 100,000 bottles of wine. That's what we call selective drought in Louisiana. Or as my Meemaw would say, some folks' gardens always seem to get rain even when the good Lord ain't sending any. The vineyard scandal is just the appetizer. Subscribe now, because Chapter 3 will expose something that'll make you furious. Share this with every California voter who suffered during the drought. Kennedy's expression shifted from folksy prosecutor to something more somber, like a preacher about to deliver a sermon on the wages of sin. He pulled out a folder marked Haiti Relief Foundation, follow the money, and placed it reverently on the desk. Now, Ms. Pelosi, this next part breaks my heart worse than watching a dog wait for an owner who ain't coming home. Kennedy began, his voice carrying genuine emotion. Let's talk about charity. Real charity. The kind where you help folks who need it, not the kind where you help yourself. He pulled out a glossy brochure showing Nancy Pelosi at a glamorous San Francisco gala smiling beside celebrities and tech billionaires. After the 2010 Haiti earthquake, one of the worst natural disasters in human history, your Haiti Relief Foundation raised $47 million. $47 million from good-hearted Americans who wanted to help those poor souls in Haiti. Kennedy's voice grew quieter, forcing everyone to lean in. Folks in my state, Louisiana folks, who don't have much themselves, they dug deep. I know a church in Ville Platte that raised $10,000 from a congregation where the average family income is $30,000 a year. They thought they were helping rebuild Haiti. He pulled out financial documents, tax returns, and audit reports. So imagine my surprise, and I'm using the word surprise when I really mean disgust, when our investigation found that only 3 million actually made it to Haiti. 3 million out of 47. The room gasped. Even the jaded Washington press corps seemed shocked. Now, where did the other 4 million go, though? Well, that's more interesting than watching a possum play dead. Kennedy began laying out documents like a dealer spreading cards on a table. Administrative cut $8.2 million, including $50,000 for a foundation planning retreat at a 5-star resort in Napa Valley. I guess you needed wine and spa treatments to figure out how to help earthquake victims. Consultant fees $12.7 million. The consultant's your former chief of staff, your campaign manager's wife, your daughter's best friend from college. Mighty convenient how all these folks suddenly became Haiti experts overnight. Fundraising events, $15.3 million. You spent $50 million to raise $47 million. That's like spending $1 to make $2, except the dollar came from the charity pot. My cousin Boudreaux could raise money at a crawfish boil for 1/10 of that cost. Pelosi tried to interject. These are standard foundation expenses. Standard. Kennedy's voice rose for the first time, real anger breaking through his careful control. Ma'am, you know what's standard children in Haiti dying from cholera because they didn't have clean water. Water systems that 44 million could have built 10 times over. He pulled out photographs that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. Images of Haiti's devastation contrasted with photos of the Pelosi Foundation's luxury fundraising galas. While you were sipping champagne at the St. Regis Hotel, and I have the receipts, $75,000 bar tab, Haitian mothers were burying their babies. Babies that your 44 million could have saved. Kennedy pulled out a letter handling it with obvious care. This is from Father Jean-Baptiste Michel, runs an orphanage in Port-au-Prince. He wrote to your foundation 17 times asking for help. Just $50,000 to repair their building and buy food for 100 orphans. You sent him a form letter in a t-shirt. He looked up, his eyes now blazing with righteous fury barely contained beneath southern politeness. But here's the part that makes me madder than a wet hen in a thunderstorm. Your foundation claimed on its website, and I quote, "Every dollar goes directly to Haiti relief." That's not misleading, ma'am. That's what we call a bald-faced lie where I come from. Kennedy pulled out one final document, an IRS audit request. The IRS is now investigating your foundation. Turns out claiming charitable deductions for money you spent on yourself is what they call tax fraud. But I'm sure you knew that, being in Congress and all. He leaned back, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. You know what we call someone who steals from earthquake victims in Louisiana? We have a lot of words for it, but none of them are suitable for C-SPAN. My Meemaw would wash my mouth out with soap if I said what I really think about someone who robs orphans to buy champagne. $44 million stolen from Haiti. Earthquake victims. Share this right now before they try to hide the evidence. Comment. Audit every charity. If you think all political foundations should be investigated, Kennedy shifted to a new section of his investigation, pulling out a folder so thick it required both hands to lift. The label read, San Francisco Federal Funds, where did the money go? Ms. Pelosi, Kennedy began, his tone shifting to that of a disappointed parent who'd caught their child with their hand in the cookie jar. Let's talk about San Francisco. Your district for over 30 years. The city you claim to love at more than king cake at Mardi Gras. He pulled out federal budget allocations and grant documents. Over the past decade, San Francisco has received $3.2 billion in federal funds specifically earmarked for homeless services. That's billion with a B, as in bigger than a Baptist church's fried chicken budget. Kennedy displayed photographs of San Francisco's streets, tent city's human waste needles littering the sidewalks. Now, with $3.2 billion, you could build housing for every homeless person in San Francisco 10 times over. You could provide mental health services, job training, addiction treatment. You could transform lives. Instead, San Francisco looks like, well, it looks like hell with better weather. He pulled out financial tracking documents. So where did the money go? Well, that's a mystery bigger than who stole the cookies from the cookie jar, except we know exactly who stole these cookies. Kennedy began listing recipients of federal homeless funds. Bay Area Social Justice Alliance received $45 million, their primary accomplishment producing a 10-page report on homeless equity, cost per page $4.5 million. I've seen shorter books that cost less than a cup of coffee. Progressive Solutions Network received $62 million, run by your former campaign manager. They provided consulting services. No actual services to homeless people, just consulting about consulting. San Francisco Community Partners received $38 million. Their CEO, your nephew by marriage. Their main expense, a $15 million awareness campaign that consisted of billboards telling people homelessness exists. As if folks stepping over bodies on Market Street needed a billboard to know that. Pelosi attempted to defend. These organizations that do important work. Important work, Kennedy interrupted, his Louisiana accent thickening with indignation. Ma'am, I've seen more useful work from a screen door on a submarine. At least the screen door doesn't cost taxpayers $3.2 billion. He pulled out testimony from whistleblowers within the organizations. Former employee of Bay Area Social Justice Alliance says here, and I quote, We were told explicitly to maximize administrative costs and minimize direct services. The goal was to keep the money flowing, not solve homelessness. Kennedy displayed a chart showing the flow of money. It's like a crawfish maze, except instead of a crawfish finding its way out, it's taxpayer money finding its way into your friends' pockets. 180 million of that $3.2 billion simply vanished, can't be accounted for. Disappeared like a politician's promises after Election Day. He pulled out photos of specific individuals. This is James Morrison, veteran, homeless in San Francisco for 5 years despite your billions in funding. He applied for housing assistance 17 times, rejected every time because he didn't meet the equity criteria your organizations established. This is Sarah Chen, former teacher, living in her car with her 2 children after her husband died of cancer. Your district office is 3 blocks from where she parks every night. She's written to you 9 times. Never got a response beyond a form letter. Kennedy's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. But here's what really gets me fired up hotter than a jalapeno in July. While that 180 million was disappearing, while veterans slept in the streets, while families lived in cars, you were claiming San Francisco as a model city for homeless services. He pulled out Pelosi's own quotes from various speeches. San Francisco leads the nation in compassionate, homeless solutions. That's what you said. Compassionate, ma'am. There's more compassion in an alligator's smile than in your homeless policies. You created a poverty industry, organizations that profit from homelessness without solving it. It's like hiring arsonists to run the fire department. They'll always have work, but the fires never stop. Kennedy looked directly at the cameras. In Louisiana, we feed the hungry before we feed our political friends. But I reckon y'all do things differently in San Francisco. You feed your friends and let the hungry watch through the restaurant window. San Francisco's homeless crisis was manufactured for profit. Comment, drain the swamp. If you're as angry as I am, share this with every California voter who's tired of the corruption. Kennedy's demeanor shifted to that of a seasoned prosecutor about to present his most damning evidence. He pulled out a folder marked January 6th, Communications Analysis, and handled it with the gravity of someone dealing with historical documents. Now, Ms. Pelosi, Kennedy began his voice careful and measured. I want to be very clear about something. What happened on January 6th was wrong, period. End of story. Folks who broke the law should be held accountable. But there's more to this story than what we've been told, then, isn't there? He pulled out a timeline of communications, each entry meticulously documented. As Speaker of the House, you were responsible for Capitol security. The Capitol Police reported to you, and you made some very interesting decisions in the days leading up to January 6th. Kennedy displayed official Capitol Police documents. December 28, 2020, Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund requests additional National Guard support for January 6th. Request denied by the Speaker's office. Reason given. Optics. January 2nd, 2021, FBI Field Office warns of potential security threats. Chief Sund again requests National Guard presence. Again denied by Speaker's office. January 4th, 2021, final security briefing. Chief Sund makes third request for enhanced security. Denied. Your exact words according to the meeting minutes. We don't need military presence. It sends the wrong message. Kennedy looked up from the documents. Now, I'm just a simple country lawyer, but when your police chief asks 3 times for help and you say no 3 times, that's not an oversight. That's a decision, like deciding not to fix the levee before the hurricane. He pulled out text messages obtained through FOIA requests. These are text messages between your staff on January 5th. Your chief of staff writes, and I quote, "Tomorrow's going to be historic. Make sure the cameras catch everything. This will define Trump forever." Your communications director responds, "Should we alert members to safety concerns?" Your chief of staff, "No, we need authentic reactions." Kennedy's voice grew harder. Authentic reactions. While you were planning for good television, Chief Sund was begging for resources to protect the Capitol. He displayed security camera positioning documents. Interesting thing about the security cameras that day. They were repositioned on January 5th to focus on areas where confrontations were most likely. Who ordered that repositioning? Your sergeant at arms acting on instructions from your office. Pelosi interjected, "Security operations are classified." "Were classified," Kennedy corrected. "The January 6th committee declassified them. Selectively, of course. They declassified everything that made Trump look bad, but kept classified everything about security decisions. Funny how that works." Kennedy pulled out a particularly damning document. "This is an email from your office to CNN on January 5th. Subject line, tomorrow's coverage. You were coordinating media coverage before anything happened. Either you're psychic or you knew something was coming." He leaned forward, his intensity filling the room. "But here's what really sticks in my craw like a fishbone. After January 6th, you immediately had professional photographers in your office. You had a film crew following you around. You were mic'd up and camera ready within minutes. Meanwhile, Chief's son, who'd begged for resources, was forced to resign." Kennedy displayed resignation documents. Chief's son's resignation letter, the real one, not the edited version released to the public, says, and I quote, "I was prevented from doing my job by political considerations. Lives were lost because of decisions made above my pay grade." He pulled out one final piece of evidence. This is from a Capitol police officer who was there that day. Decorated veteran, 20 years on the force. He says, "We were set up to fail. Denied resources, denied backup, then blamed when it went wrong." Kennedy's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, forcing everyone to lean in. "My grandpappy used to say, if you want to catch a thief, look for who benefits from the crime." January 6th destroyed Trump's presidency, justified a massive expansion of government power, and gave you unlimited media coverage as a victim. You benefited from every angle. He closed the folder with finality. "I'm not saying you planned January 6th. I'm saying you made sure it would be as bad as possible when it happened. In Louisiana, we call that letting the fire burn so you can sell fire insurance. January 6th was more orchestrated than you ever imagined. Hit the notification bell, because what comes next changes everything. Type 'release all documents' if you think America deserves the full truth." Kennedy pulled out his largest folder, yet requiring him to use both hands to place it on the desk. The label read, "Political money laundering while we follow the donors," and it was stuffed with financial documents, bank records, and corporate filings. "Miss Pelosi," Kennedy began, settling back into his storytelling posture. "In Louisiana, we have these things called fishing tournaments. Everybody puts money in the pot, and whoever catches the biggest fish wins. Simple, transparent, honest. Your donor network, on the other hand, is like a fishing tournament where the fish are pre-caught, the scales are rigged, and everybody who pays gets a trophy." He pulled out a complex chart that looked like a spider web made of money trails. "Over your career, you've raised over $800 million in political donations. That's more money than some small country's GDP. But here's where it gets fishier than a seafood market in August. The same money keeps circulating through the same people like a dollar bill in a rigged poker game." Kennedy began tracing the money flows with his finger. "Corporation A donates to your PAC. Your PAC donates to nonprofit B. Nonprofit B pays consulting firm Choi. Consulting firm C is owned by Corporation A's board member's wife. The money just goes round and round like a dog chasing its tail, except the dog is getting paid and the tail is taxpayer funded." He pulled out specific examples. Tech giant X donated $10 million to your campaigns over 10 years. Coincidentally, they received $2 billion in federal contracts from committees you controlled. That's a 200-to-1 return on investment. Better odds than finding a pearl in an oyster. Pharmaceutical company Y donated $5 million to your various PACs. Mysteriously, legislation that would have reduced drug prices died in your committees 17 times. Those must be some mighty persuasive donations. Defense contractor Z donated $8 million to your political network. They received $4 billion on no-bid contracts. In Louisiana, we call that buying a politician. In Washington, you call it the democratic process. Pelosi attempted to respond. Campaign finance laws. "Oh, I know all about campaign finance laws," Kennedy interrupted cheerfully. "I've read them, all of them. You know what they remind me of? Swiss cheese, full of holes big enough to drive a Mardi Gras float through." He pulled out incorporation documents. "You've created 47 different political organizations. PACs, Super PACs, 501c3s, 501c4s. It's like a shell game at a carnival, except the mark is the American taxpayer. Kennedy displayed a particularly damning document. This is my favorite. The Pelosi Leadership Fund raised $20 million for voter education. The education materials, a two-page flyer that costs $50,000 to produce. The other, teeny in $950,000 administrative costs. Those must be some expensive administrators. He pulled out photos of luxury events. Here's those administrative costs at work. Private jet flights, $2 million, five-star hotel stays, $1.5 million. Strategy dinners at restaurants where the wine costs more than a teacher's monthly salary, $3 million. Kennedy's voice took on an edge of genuine disgust. But here's what really burns my biscuits. While you were flying private and dining fancy on donation money, you were voting to raise taxes on working families. You were eating 500 steaks while telling Americans to tighten their belts. He pulled out donor lists and cross-referenced them with government contracts. 93% of your major donors receive federal contracts, grants, or beneficial legislation within 2 years of donating. 93%. That's not coincidence. That's not even correlation. That's what we call pay-to-play in English, or bribery in plain speak. Kennedy displayed one final chart. This shows every donation over $100,000 mapped against legislative actions. It's like a recipe book for corruption. Donate X amount, get Y legislation. It's more predictable than my Meemaw's cornbread recipe. He looked directly at Pelosi, then at the cameras. You've turned democracy into an auction house where legislation goes to the highest bidder. In Louisiana, we might be simple folks, but we know the difference between public service and self-service. And ma'am, you've been helping yourself into seconds, thirds, and fourths at the public trough. This donor network reaches every corner of government. Type Kennedy for president. If you think we need more leaders like him, share this with everyone who's tired of pay-to-play politics. Kennedy saved his most comprehensive folder for last. It was labeled simply, The Pelosi Empire, and contained what appeared to be the result of forensic accounting that would make IRS auditors weep with joy. Ms. Pelosi, Kennedy began, his voice taking on the tone of a Southern preacher about to deliver the sermon's climax. Let's talk about how someone on a congressional salary of $174,000 a year accumulated a fortune worth over $200 million. That's some mighty impressive saving. You must clip a lot of coupons. He pulled out a family tree, but instead of relatives, it showed corporate modern entities. The Pelosi family controls 89 different business entities, LLCs, partnerships, trusts, holding companies. It's more complex than my cousin Thibodeau's explanation of how he's related to everyone in Vermilion Parish. Kennedy began with real estate. Y'all own 11 properties worth a combined $42 million. There's the mansion in Pacific Heights, $50 million. The Napa Valley estate, $12 million. This Georgetown townhouse, $8 million. This beach house in Florida nobody's supposed to know about, $7 million. He pulled out mortgage documents. Interesting thing about these mortgages, several were approved by banks that received TARP bailout funds you voted for. The interest rates well below market. Some might call that a kickback. I call it what it is, a bribe with paperwork. Kennedy moved to the investment portfolio. Your disclosed assets show $100 million in stocks and options, but that's just what you have to disclose. Hidden in various family trusts and offshore entities, oh yes, we found those too, is another $85 million. He displayed corporate registration documents from Delaware, Nevada, and mysteriously the Cayman Islands. Why does a congressional family need accounts in the Cayman Islands? I mean, besides the obvious reason of hiding money from the IRS. The same IRS that audits regular Americans for claiming too many work-from-home deductions. Kennedy pulled out government contracts. Your nephew's construction company received $45 million in federal contracts. His qualification, being your nephew. Your son's investment firm manages pension funds for unions you helped with legislation. Fees collected $12 million annually. Your daughter's consulting firm advises companies on government relations. Translation, how to buy influence with mom. Annual revenue, $8 million. He looked up from the documents, his expression one of barely contained disgust. You've turned public service into a family ATM machine. In Louisiana, we call that stealing, but I suppose in Washington you call it politics. Kennedy pulled out a comparative analysis. When you entered Congress in 1987, your reported net worth was $3 million inherited from your father. Today, it's over $200 million. That's a 600% increase. During the same period, the average American family's wealth increased by 115%. Y'all must have some secret that the rest of America doesn't know about. Oh, wait, you do. It's called insider information and corruption. He displayed photos of lavish family celebrations. Your grandson's wedding, $2 million affair, paid for by a family foundation that's supposed to be charitable. Your birthday party last year, $500,000, charged to your campaign as a fundraising event. Mighty expensive fundraising when the funds raised all go to fund more raising. Kennedy's voice dropped to a whisper that carried more weight than any shout. But here's what really shows the depth of your corruption. During COVID, while small businesses were forced to close, while families lost everything, your husband's companies received $7 million in PPP loans. Loans that were forgiven. Free money for millionaires while regular folks lost their life's work. He pulled out the PPP loan documents. Financial leasing services owned by Paul Pelosi received $1.5 million. Employees saved according to their filing 3. That's $500,000 per employee. Those must be some valuable employees. Kennedy looked directly at Pelosi, then at the cameras. You know what we call it in Louisiana when someone uses their position to make their family rich? We call it corruption. But apparently in Washington, you call it the American dream. Except it's only your American dream built on the nightmares of regular Americans. He closed the folder with finality. Your family hasn't built a business empire. You've built a corruption empire. Every brick mortared with taxpayer money, every room furnished with insider trading, every floor built on the backs of Americans who actually work for a living. The Pelosi empire is worth how much? Subscribe and share, because the mainstream media will never show you this comment. Investigate them all. If every politician's wealth should be audited, the hearing room had fallen completely silent. Even the reporters had stopped typing, mesmerized by the systematic destruction they had just witnessed. Nancy Pelosi sat in her chair like a boxer who'd taken too many hits, swaying slightly, her famous composure completely shattered. Senator Kennedy closed all his folders and stacked them neatly, the gesture somehow carrying more weight than any dramatic flourish could have. He removed his reading glasses, cleaned them carefully with a handkerchief, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weariness of someone who'd seen too much corruption to be surprised anymore. Ms. Pelosi, he began, his Louisiana drawl, now soft, almost sympathetic. I want you to know something. I take no pleasure in this. None whatsoever. It's like having to put down a rabid dog. Necessary, but nothing to celebrate. He stood up slowly, his full height making him seem like a southern pine tree that had weathered countless storms. You see, ma'am, I came to Washington same as you, believing in public service. The difference is, I still believe in it. You've turned it into public self-service, helping yourself to everything that wasn't nailed down, and then prying up the nails to get at what was. Kennedy addressed the committee, but his words were really for the cameras, for the American people watching. What we've seen here today is 40 years of corruption laid bare. Insider trading that would make Gordon Gekko blush. Charity fraud that would make con artists take notes. Water theft during droughts. Pandemic profiteering. Security failures that cost lives. And a family fortune built on the backs of taxpayers. He turned back to Pelosi. You asked me earlier what Louisiana folklore has to do with congressional oversight. Well, here's one more piece of Louisiana wisdom. You can take the corruption out of Washington, but apparently you can't take Washington out of the corrupt. Kennedy pulled out one final document, a congressional censure resolution. I'm introducing this resolution today. Censure investigation and referral to the Department of Justice for prosecution. The evidence will be turned over to federal prosecutors, the SEC, the IRS, and every relevant agency. Your 40-year crime spree is over. Pelosi finally found her voice, though it was weak and trembling. Senator, these are baseless accusations. Baseless. Kennedy's eyebrows rose like a drawbridge. Ma'am, I've got more receipts than a CVS pharmacy, more evidence than a CSI episode, more proof than a geometry textbook. The only thing baseless here is your defense. He gathered his materials, preparing to leave, then turned back for one final statement. You know what the saddest part is? You could have been great. You could have actually helped people. Instead, you chose to help yourself. You had 40 years to serve America, and you spent every single day serving yourself. Kennedy's voice rose slightly, the passion finally breaking through his controlled demeanor. The good people of America deserve better than a democracy for sale to the highest bidder. They deserve better than representatives who view public office as a personal aid. They deserve better than leaders who steal from earthquake victims and drought-stricken farmers. He looked directly at the cameras one last time. To the American people watching, this is your government. These are your tax dollars. This is your democracy. You deserve to know where your money goes, who's getting rich off your suffering, and who's actually serving you versus serving themselves. And to my colleagues in Congress, let this be a warning. The days of consequence-free corruption are over. We're going to audit every foundation, investigate every trade track, every dollar. The swamp isn't going to drain itself, but by God, we're going to pull the plug. Kennedy picked up his briefcase and prepared to leave, but stopped at the door for one final comment, delivered with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. Oh, and Ms. Pelosi, my Meemaw always said, the chickens always come home to roost. Well, ma'am, your whole chicken farm just showed up at once, and they're mighty angry birds. He walked out slowly, deliberately, leaving behind a scene of complete political devastation. Nancy Pelosi sat alone at the witness table, her 40-year career in ruins, her family's corruption exposed, her legacy destroyed. The cameras captured her final expression. Not defiance, not anger, but the hollow look of someone who'd finally been caught after decades of getting away with everything. Justice served. But this is just the beginning. Like, subscribe and share to help expose every corrupt politician in Washington. Comment, drain the swamp, if you want to see more investigations like this. The impact of Senator Kennedy's systematic exposure of Nancy Pelosi's corruption was immediate and devastating. Within hours of the hearing's conclusion, the footage had become the most watched political content in C-SPAN history. Social media exploded with clips, memes, and discussions about what Americans had just witnessed. Had Pelosi corruption trended globally within minutes. Had Kennedy for president followed shortly after. Had Drain the Swamp experienced its biggest surge since 2016. But more importantly, had Audit Congress became a rallying cry for Americans across the political spectrum. The mainstream media, which had protected Pelosi for decades, found themselves in an impossible position. The evidence Kennedy presented was too comprehensive, too documented, too damaging to ignore or spin. Even CNN and MSNBC had to cover the story, though they tried desperately to minimize it as allegations and claims, despite the mountain of documentation. Within 24 hours, the House Ethics Committee announced a formal investigation. The Department of Justice, under massive public pressure, opened criminal inquiries into insider trading, charity fraud, and misuse of federal funds. The SEC launched its own investigation into the Pelosi family's trades. The IRS began forensic audits of every Pelosi-connected entity. California prosecutors, seeing which way the wind was blowing, suddenly discovered irregularities in water rights allocations during the drought years. The California Attorney General announced an investigation into potential corruption in water resource management. The Haiti government, emboldened by Kennedy's revelations, formally requested an investigation into what happened to the $44 million that never reached their country. The international embarrassment was overwhelming. But the most significant impact was on Pelosi herself. Within 48 hours, she announced she was stepping back from public life to focus on her family and health. It was Washington speak for complete surrender. Her resignation from Congress followed a week later, ending one of the longest and most powerful careers in American political history. Her family's business empire began crumbling immediately. Federal asset forfeiture proceedings froze accounts pending investigation. The IRS placed liens on properties. Business partners fled like rats from a sinking ship. The Pelosi name, once synonymous with power, became toxic overnight. Paul Pelosi's investment fund saw massive withdrawals as clients realized their returns had been built on insider information. Within a month, the fund had lost 90% of its assets under management. The SEC's investigation revealed exactly what everyone suspected. Nearly every successful trade had been based on information Nancy had provided from classified briefings. The Haiti Relief Foundation was forced to shut down after donors demanded their money back. Class action lawsuits were filed on behalf of everyone who donated believing their money would help earthquake victims. The foundation's board members, all Pelosi allies, resigned in disgrace. Several of Pelosi's political allies found themselves under investigation as well. The network of corruption Kennedy had exposed reached deep into both parties. Dozens of members of Congress suddenly announced retirements, hoping to escape before their own corruption was exposed. For Senator Kennedy, the hearing transformed him from a regional political figure known for folksy quotes into a national hero for government accountability. His approval ratings in Louisiana hit 85 for him. National polling showed him as the most trusted politician in America, a title that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. But true to his character, Kennedy didn't seek to capitalize on his newfound fame. He returned to Louisiana, held a simple press conference, and said, "I just did what needed doing, like cleaning out the barn. It's a dirty job, but someone's got to do it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a pot of gumbo on the stove, and it needs tending to." 6 months after the hearing, Nancy Pelosi was indicted on 47 federal charges, including insider trading, wire fraud, charity fraud, and conspiracy. Her plea deal included forfeiture of $120 million in assets and an agreement to cooperate with ongoing investigations. The Kennedy hearing, as it came to be known, became required viewing in political science classes. It demonstrated that with enough preparation, evidence, and moral authority, even the most powerful politicians could be held accountable. But perhaps the most lasting impact was on American politics itself. The exposure of Pelosi's 40-year corruption spree led to the most comprehensive political reform movement in American history. New laws were passed requiring real-time disclosure of all congressional stock trades. Charitable foundations connected to politicians faced strict new oversight. Campaign finance laws were completely rewritten. And in Louisiana, Senator John Kennedy continued serving his constituents, attending local fish fries, telling his stories, and occasionally reminding Washington that Southern wisdom and a commitment to truth could still triumph over corruption and power. As Kennedy himself said in a later interview, "Sometimes you've got to show folks that the emperor has no clothes, or in this case, that the empress has been wearing clothes bought with stolen money. Either way, the truth has a way of coming out, even if it takes 40 years and a country lawyer from Louisiana to reveal it." The swamp had been drained one corrupt politician at a time, and it all started with a Southern gentleman who refused to let corruption hide behind power and privilege. Make sure to subscribe for more political accountability. Share this with everyone who needs to know the truth about Washington corruption. Comment below. Which politician should be investigated next? The revolution for honest government starts with you. Hit that notification bell because we're just getting started draining this swamp.